Good evening. You're with the Mojo Story. I am Barkha Dutt. Will India's Muslims outnumber India's Hindus? This is something that is often suggested by right-wing groups, and we even have states like Uttar Pradesh that now want to bring in a population control legislation. But this could be one of the biggest myths of our time. A new finding, a new report by the Pew Research Center throws up some fascinating findings. Let's look at a big story on the program today. There has been, according to this report by the Pew Research Center, only a modest change in India's religious composition since 1951. The Pew Research Center looked at the growths in all religious communities to find that all religious groups had shown, yes, an increase in absolute numbers, but all groups were now showing a decline in fertility. The fertility rate continues to be the highest among Muslim groups, but the decline is also the sharpest. Hindus make up 79.98% of the population, while Muslims make up a little over 14%. Basically, the big finding is that fertility is actually stabilizing in India, begging the question as to why a population law, as promised by Yogi Adityanath at the right time, is needed at all, because activists believe it will only punish the poor, in particular punishing women. There is also the apprehension that this could be a bogey, a stick to beat India's Muslims with. Let's go across now straight to our panel of experts on the program today, and let's bring them up one by one. We're joined on the program by Sanghamitra Singh of the Population Foundation of India, who's an expert who's worked in these areas. Mohandas Pai, educationist, venture capitalist, entrepreneur, is with us as well. Sharad Pradhan, senior journalist, is with us. And we're also joined by Ashwini Kumar. Ashwini Kumar Shahi is the spokesperson of the BJP, and we hope to have Zafar Sareshwala with us in a few moments. Sanghamitra, if I can ask you first to lend your expert perspective to something that I know that your foundation has been arguing for a long time. Two things. One, that population numbers are actually stabilizing. And two, that all religious groups, Hindus, Muslims, and others, are actually showing decline. And because the absolute numbers of population growth in Muslims continues to be high, this decline is also actually sharper, steeper than it is among all other religious groups. So go ahead and take us through the main takeaways of this Pew report.
Thanks, Barkha. The findings from the Pew Research Center's report, they actually resonate the data from Government of India's, actually Ministry of Health and Family Welfare's National Family Health Survey. The fourth round of the survey very clearly showed that while Muslims might have the highest absolute TFR or total fertility rate among different religious groups, they have witnessed the maximum decline as well. The other thing that I would like to point out over here is that we cannot look at fertility rates as being specific to religious groups. I don't think there is any such thing as Muslim fertility rate and Hindu fertility rate. Fertility rates actually decline by wealth quintile, by education levels of women. And that's also something that government data very clearly shows. So investments in education, investments in development is actually the biggest contraceptive and plays a very, very crucial role in bringing down fertility rates, regardless of what the religious group might be.
Okay, before I open this up for the others, two broad things that you're saying. One is that fertility rates are actually declining in all groups, right? Mm-hmm. So when we focus on, let's say, the fertility is highest among Muslims, that doesn't tell the full story. What would be the full story?
The full story would be that the decline in the fertility rates is also the highest in this religious group. And if you look at different states within the country, in UP, Hindus and Muslims both have high fertility rates. Whereas if you look at developed states down south, then both Hindus and Muslims have lower fertility rates. If you look at other Muslim-dominated countries in the world, like Indonesia and Bangladesh, their fertility rates, they totally outpass India's, because they have invested in family planning, they've invested in women's empowerment and education. So there is, I mean, it's not very right to categorize fertility rates by religious groups, because they are, I mean, just religion is not the deciding factor on how many children people are having. Another thing that I would like to point out over here is that on an average, 60% of Muslim women have more than 2 children, whereas 67% of Hindu women have more than 2 children. The difference is not so much if you look at, if you actually were to compare the two data sets. So, I mean, I'd like to reiterate here that there is no such thing as religious fertility. It is fertility by wealth quintile, by education levels, and that really is the deciding factor.
So one of the really interesting things that comes out of what you're saying, as well as this Pew report, Sanghamitra, is that there is a geographical variation which could be explained by cultural practices, also by socioeconomic factors. But, for example, you say Hindus and Muslims have similar fertility rates in the south, and in the north, where Indian Muslims might be much poorer in socioeconomic indices, their fertility rate is higher. So class explains a lot, not the religion itself. Just to pick
and health
up
and
one,
development indicators. And health and development.
That's
Yes.
right. And I'm just picking up one figure from this Pew report, which shows that the number of children per Indian woman fell from 3.4 children in the 90s to 2.2 in 2015. This is across religious groups. So overall, these numbers are falling. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, all religious groups, fertility rate is falling. But what's interesting is, as we've been saying, that among Muslims, the fall is much sharper. So the absolute growth remains the highest, but the percentage of fall is the sharper. So, for example, among Muslims, the fall is from 4.4 children per Indian woman in the 90s to 2.6 children per woman. And once again, the fact that numbers are falling in all groups begs the question, why do we need a population law at all? Ashwini ji, आप भाजपा के प्रवक्ता हैं उत्तर प्रदेश से. उत्तर प्रदेश के मुख्यमंत्री योगी जी ने चुनावों से कुछ महीने पहले ये बयान दिया है कि एक लेजिस्लेशन आना चाहिए, एक कानून आना चाहिए, देयर शुड बी अ लॉ टू कंट्रोल पॉपुलेशन. लेकिन अगर आप ये आंकड़े देखिए तो आप पाएंगे कि चाहे हिंदू हो, मुस्लिम हो, सिख हो, क्रिश्चियन हो, इन ऑल ग्रुप्स एक्चुअली फर्टिलिटी इज फॉलिंग. अवेयरनेस कैंपेन्स, एक्टिविस्ट्स हैव बीन डूइंग देयर जॉब. तो ये क्यों कानून चाहिए, और क्या आपको ये आंकड़े देख के लगता है कि इस पे दोबारा सोच होनी चाहिए, अश्विनी जी?
देखिए बरखा जी, सबसे पहले तो योगी जी ने जो आपने पूछा योगी जी का, ये टोटल फिगर पे आप जाइए. अभी ठीक है, ये मैं मानता हूं कि सारे आंकड़े आए हैं, उसमें सब लोग का फर्टिलिटी रेट गिर रहा है, लेकिन अभी मैं कहना चाहूंगा अगर ओवरऑल लिया जाए तो 1951 की जनगणना और 2011 की जनगणना, इन दोनों में हिंदू आबादी गिरी है 4.1% और मुस्लिम आबादी बढ़ी है 4.4%. इसलिए आसाम में, उड़ीसा में, बिहार में, उत्तराखंड में, राजस्थान और सारे लगभग प्रदेशों में ये चीजें लागू हैं. कहीं पर स्थानीय निकाय में चुनाव पर रोक लगाने की बात कही गई है, कहीं सरकारी नौकरियों पर. मध्य प्रदेश और छत्तीसगढ़ में भी कहा गया था, लेकिन 2005 में जनता के दबाव के कारण वापस लेना पड़ा उनको. लेकिन अभी भी सरकारी नौकरियों में है, कई जगह पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन वगैरह में कहीं उनका है अभी भी. तो ये कानून ले आना बहुत जरूरी है. फर्टिलिटी रेट रोकना, जनसंख्या की वृद्धि रोकना. क्योंकि देखिए दो चीजें होती हैं हिंदुस्तान में, कहीं भी आप जाइए तो जो गरीब हो, चाहे मुस्लिम हो या हिंदू हो, ये गरीबों के बीच में ही जनसंख्या की प्रॉब्लम है. अगर वो पढ़ लिख के शहरों में आते हैं तो वो शहरों में वो वहीं पर, चाहे वो मुस्लिम हो या हिंदू हो, दोनों संभल जाते हैं. एक बच्चे बहुत हुआ तो 2 बच्चे. उत्तर प्रदेश की जहां तक मैं बात करता हूं, 57 जिलों में हिंदू आबादी कम होती गई है, मुस्लिम आबादी बढ़ रही है लगातार. ये आंकड़े आज हैं और ये पीयू वहां पर नहीं करता है. पीयू तो पूरे विश्व की, पूरे क्या कहते हैं, एशिया की आबादी का कह रहा है कि सॉरी यूरोप की 7.5% हो जाएगी मुस्लिम की. तो उसके आंकड़े और उत्तर प्रदेश में जो आंकड़े हम देख रहे हैं, उत्तर प्रदेश में हमारे 75 जिलों में अगर 57 जिलों में बरखा जी हम मुस्लिम आबादी बढ़ रही है, तो इसको क्यों ना योगी जी इस चीज को लागू करें.
अच्छा, मैं आपसे एक चीज पूछना चाहती हूँ. आपने जो 4% का फिगर दिया, that is accurate. Even the Pew report shows that since the 1950s. लेकिन ये एक इसकी framing ठीक होनी होगी. ये 60 साल की हम बात कर रहे हैं. In 60 years, the Hindu sort of rate of growth has fallen as a percentage of population by a little over 4%, and the Muslim fertility has increased as a percentage of population by 4%. But Sanghamitra, if you can explain this further, this is up to a point after which we start seeing a massive decline, a sharp decline in the Muslim fertility rate as well. So for those who argue that Muslims are galloping at a quicker rate than Hindus, you would say what? Because this is something we hear again and again.
So if you look at the findings from the Pew report, it does say very clearly that actually the share of population contribution of different religious groups, it hasn't really changed since the first census in 1951. So I think that argument is baseless. The second thing that I want to reiterate now is that this report is based on Ministry of Health and Family Welfare's National Family Health Survey data. So this is government data. This is not some this is based on our data. So the analysis really comes from something that we've already seen and we've been arguing in this direction. The second thing that I would like to highlight over here is that when we talk in the context of UP, or for that matter, in the context of the country also, India is a young country today. 70% of India's population is below 35 years of age. A vast majority of our people are in the reproductive age group. So although our population is very close to stabilizing, which means two children per couple, which means we will exactly be able to replace our population, because we have such a large body of people in the reproductive age group, even if they on an average have 2 children, our population will continue to grow for the next, I would say, 30 years till it actually stabilizes. So right now, to implement a coercive policy, it's only going to lead to other issues like sex selective abortions. We must not forget, and this report also very clearly highlights, that India has actually lost close to 20 million women girls to sex selective abortion. So if you give, if you force people to have 2 children, they would still want to make sure that one child out of those 2 children is a son.
Yeah,
what would that mean?
And the other thing the report focuses on is that the fertility rate is even less among younger Muslim women. So perhaps a generational change, also greater access to contraception, greater access to education awareness, all of that is playing a part. Ashwini ji, मेरे कुछ आपसे और भी सवाल हैं, लेकिन let me just get perspectives from Mohandas Pai and Sharad Pradhan. Mohan, you're a data person. You understand numbers. Numbers don't lie. You must have seen the overall findings of the Pew survey, which says that there's been a modest change, but a very modest change, and it doesn't really demand this kind of myth making about Muslims outnumbering Hindus. I think that has been put to rest. Would you agree?
Barka, let me say this, like Sanghamitra said, this is Government of India data. I've been reading this data for the last 10 years. I've written extensively on this. The whole of India today is come to 2.0 in fertility. Whole of India is below replacement because this is data from 14-15 and it's already 6 years, right? And if you look at the trend lines, we are below replacement. Muslims have come down. Now let us get one data right. The share of Muslim population today has gone up to maybe 15% if you take the trend line. Hindus have come down to 79% from 85% around independence. So Muslims have grown faster. Fertility in Hindus has come down
by 4%. By 4%. We have a number for it. By 4%. Since 1951.
Yes, 4% on 1.38 billion people is a lot of people. Okay, there's 55 million people more. And if you look at the growth of the Hindu population between 51 to 2011, which is the data, is gone up by 3.17 times. Muslims have gone up by 4.92 times. This tells us that Muslim fertility decline is lagging Hindus. It will come up to the Hindu level. I agree. See, I am not putting the bogey that Muslims are going to outnumber Hindu. It will not happen. That's okay. And Muslim fertility is coming down, and that is very good news. And let me give some data why it is coming down. See, the Muslims have become the poorest community in India because of a lack of education since 1951. 1951, they were middle income to India. Now they become the poorest for a very important reason. If you look at young people in college, today Muslims make up 15% of the population, And 18-19, the ASHA report said they only make up 5.2% of students in college. SC make up 16.6, but 14.9% of students in college. The biggest problem with Muslims has been the lack of education, lack of college education, because like Sangamitra said, the fertility rate is directly correlated to education. You educate the Muslim girl child, she'll have smaller number
Absolutely.
of children. And that
Yes.
is where we have failed, because the education level is less. But Barka, here are the good news. From 2012-13 to 2018-19, Muslim enrollment has grown by 7.7% a year, which is the highest among all communities except ST, which has grown by 7.8%. So today the fact is, fertility for everybody is coming down. We are at less than replacement rate. The Jains are very sad, only 1.2. They may disappear in 100 years. I don't know. I tell my Jain friends. Muslim fertility is coming down, is higher than Hindu. The delta is coming down. And we need to invest in the education of the girl child for the Muslim community, give them much more scholarships. So over a period
Yes.
of time, maybe 10 years, the delta comes down further and we don't have this problem. So we should not have this problem. But there is one
Yeah.
problem which is there, the concentration of Muslims in certain districts, which will have a political impulsion, political compulsions, which I think we need to study. But overall, on the population front, you know what, the data is very clear.
Okay, I will get responses to what you said, but I just want to say one thing to you, that the rate of fertility in Muslims since 2015, Sangamitra, please correct me if I'm wrong, is now sharper than the decline in Hindu groups. So therefore, if since 1951, yes, Muslims have grown at a faster rate than Hindus, but today Muslim population is declining at a faster rate than Hindus also.
Let me give data.
Both things are true. Both things
Let
are
me
true.
give
That's
data.
all I'm saying.
Let me give data. See, I got data from NHFS survey 2003-5 to 2013-15. The rate of decline for Muslim is 22.9%. For Buddhists and non-Buddhist and neo-Buddhists, 22.7%. And for Jains, 22.1%. So they're among the top three communities which have seen the steepest decline. And all the three are almost similar. 22.9, 22.7, and 22.1. Of course, Muslims are a larger percent of population, so the impact is much, much more. We don't have data for today. I'm sure the decline will be there today also. I mean, all this is data. Data is available in this country. I hope you read Indian data, Barka. Indian data is available, Barka.
But as Sangamitra pointed out, the Pew researchers have not come in and come up with their own data. They've actually used Government of India data.
Yes.
But I don't actually find you disagreeing, Mohan, with any of the key findings of the Pew survey. Sharath, I think I think, Sharath, the question is this. We can all agree on the data. We may not agree on the response. There is Ashwini ji who believes ki kanun ki zarurat hai. We need a law. There are others like Sangamitra who will say any coercive law, any law that, we speak about brings back the emergency years, bring back memories of the Nasbandi, which was ironically a Congress plot. I have no idea why the BJP wants to venture anywhere near it. How do you see the politics around this in the light of this data, Sharath?
But it's very simple, considering that Yogi Adityanath is all set for politics of polarization, for playing up Hindutva, and he in everything, what he does is a Hindu-Muslim divide. So this is clearly aimed at forging a further divide and giving the impression, you tag along with this, the Abbajan remark. The whole idea is to say that Muslims are growing in huge numbers. They will outnumber Hindus. They eat up all the rations meant for Hindus. They eat up all the food. That is this distorted picture which Yogi Adityanath is trying to build. And because that is the only way he can further his politics and ensure another sweep, as he claims, in the next elections. So there is no doubt about it. I mean, it's so blatant that now and this data was pointed out, but there's nobody to listen. That they believe in blitzkrieg. They're bombarding people with false information, falsehood, to the extent that people start disbelieving their own truths.
Do you believe, before I go to Ashwini ji, that Yogi Adityanath's government will bring in this legislation before the elections?
He is giving us some second thoughts on this, which what I am told by people in the government. But I am sure that he will eventually bring this, because since there are so many things that they have not been the things that have not been able to do, the best way to cover up everything is by taking the Hindutva on a high pitch and forging a Hindu-Muslim divide, a politics of polarization. He is banking heavily on that, and there are so many things that he has done which are aimed only at polarization.
So let me take this.
I wouldn't be surprised if this law actually comes in.
अश्विनी जी, अभी जो योगी जी का बयान आया है वो है कि ठीक वक्त पर ये कानून लाया जाएगा। मैं आपसे पूछना चाहती हूँ कि वो ठीक वक्त की क्या डेफिनेशन है, क्या परिभाषा है? दूसरा सवाल, आपने खुद ही कहा कि जहां गरीबी है वहां पर ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम है, ये ज्यादा चैलेंज है पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ का। तो ये कानून माना जाता है कि गरीबों को पनिश करेगा अगर इसमें पनिशमेंट हो। इंसेंटिव एक अलग बात है, डिसइंसेंटिव एक दूसरी बात है। पहला सवाल। दूसरा, क्या ये कानून मुस्लिम ग्रुप्स के लिए है कि सब ग्रुप्स के लिए है जो आप कानून लाना चाहते हैं? क्योंकि आपने आंकड़े देखे और दोनों चीजें सच है। एब्सोल्यूट नंबर्स में ग्रोथ ज्यादा है मुसलमान कम्युनिटी की, लेकिन जो डिक्लाइन है आज वो डिक्लाइन भी ज्यादा है बाकी ग्रुप से।
बरखा जी, देखिए अभी जैसे दो सवाल आपके आए, दोनों सवाल एक दूसरे से मिलते जुलते हैं। रही सही समय की बात तो वो मैं बताता हूं आपको। पहले मैं आपको कहूं, जहां गरीब तबका है, मैंने पहले भी कहा और अभी भी कह रहा हूं, अगर गरीब तबका आ जाता है तो न वो हिंदू है और न वो मुसलमान है। गरीब गरीब होता है। यहां मैं शरद जी की बातों से इत्तेफाक नहीं रखता हूं। शरद जी ने कहा कि वो बांटने की और वो करना, तो ये चीज नहीं है। क्योंकि अगर हम गरीब की बात करते हैं तो उसमें हिंदू भी आता है, पारसी भी आता है। पारसी तो कम हो गए हैं, नहीं है, सिख भी हैं, गरीब मुस्लिम भी हैं। तो कानून अगर आता है तो सबके लिए आएगा, वो ये नहीं देखेगा। क्योंकि पहले देखिए कहा जाता था, अभी भी कई जगहों पर हम लोग सुनते हैं कि भाई अमीर के घर में टीवी है, उनके घर में बीबी है। तो उनको कहने का तात्पर्य आप समझिए कि क्या कहना चाह रहे हैं लोग। तो गरीबी को दूर करने का जो कार्यक्रम योगी सरकार और मोदी सरकार ने चलाया है, वो कार्यक्रम उस पर थोड़े दिनों बाद असर करेंगे। अभी भी ये माना गया है कि मुस्लिम्स में उनके फर्टिलिटी में बढ़ाव, जन्म दर में गिरावट हुई है, लेकिन उनके यहां जो है थोड़ा सा अभी भी उनका जनसंख्या ज्यादा है, जन्म दर में गिरावट हुई है। अगर दूसरे तरीके से देखा जाए तो एक तरफ मुस्लिम्स की जन्म दर में जो है 5% की गिरावट है और हिंदू में 3.5% की गिरावट है, ये भी एक सत्य है। तो हम आंकड़ों के आधार पर चलें तो इसमें, लेकिन उसका जो जड़ है, जड़ को हमको पकड़ना पड़ेगा बरखा जी। और वो अभी भी धीरे धीरे, जैसे सोनेवाल जी ने किया, जैसे राजस्थान की मैंने बात की, उड़ीसा में भी चल रहा है, ये हर जगह। अभी भी पंचायत में चुनाव, सबसे पहले स्थानीय निकाय और पंचायत पर इन लोगों ने किया है, अभी कोई पनिशमेंट का कहीं कुछ नहीं आया है। तो योगी जी ने भी कहा कि अब देखा जाएगा, क्योंकि अभी वो हमारे यहाँ जो है ला कमेटियां जो है देख रही हैं उसको, इसमें क्या क्या किया जा सकता है। और उसका सही समय चुनाव ही नहीं होता है, उसका सही समय कि कब उसको हम लागू कर सकते हैं, उसमें क्या क्या हम कड़ाई कर सकते हैं, क्या क्या नरमी बरत सकते हैं। इसको ये न माना जाए शरद जी कि ये सिर्फ मुस्लिम्स के लिए है।
Okay, I'll come to Sharad Pradhan in a moment, but Sanghmitra, what does your research show you? It's very difficult actually even to explain to educated middle class Indians why a population control legislation could be a bad idea. People find it counterintuitive because if you ask middle class Indians what's the biggest problem facing India, they'll say we've got too many people, right? It's difficult to convince people that these numbers are finally stabilizing. That actually China had to review its one-child norm, finding that it didn't really work out the way that it was meant to. And above all, that this will punish women. The access for women to contraception, these are the areas that we should focus on. Equality in marital relations, sexual relations, ये सब कोई बात करता ही नहीं है. We make it a Hindu-Muslim thing, जिससे actually stability आ सकती है. वो बातें हम लोग ज्यादातर करते नहीं है. Sanghmitra, what is your concern if a law were to come through, whether in UP or other states? And by the way, there's also a private members legislation in Parliament.
Right. So I'd like to go back to the point that I made earlier. We already have a large population base. We are a country of 1.3 billion right now with a large population of young people. If you bring in a law also, you're still going to allow people to have at least 2 children. So the population, if 70% of your population is having 2 children on an average, the population will still continue to increase for an X number of years before it stabilizes. There are enough and more projections to show that. There are projections by the UN. There are several other projections to show that the population will stabilize by 2050. Now, in a country which is marred by patriarchy, in a country where social norms don't really give women the agency and autonomy to decide how many children they would like to have, and where son preference is very, very predominant. Like I said earlier, if couples are forced to have 2 children, especially couples in the lower strata of the society, they will still, opt for selective abortions, or for, they will come up with any means to make sure that out of the 2 children that they have, they at least
Okay.
have one son. Now, in the long run, what
Yeah.
does this lead to? This leads to a population crisis. That's what China eventually faced. You will have a disbalanced sex ratio. And that's not something that you can easily reverse. It's not like once you have a disbalance, a gender imbalance, you can actually at a later stage then say that, we are taking back the coercive policy like China is trying to do now. But they are already in this crisis situation, which they really can't fix. And
Yeah.
like I said, like other people are also saying, the fertility rates are highest among the poorer people, which means that they will be the ones who will be the most impacted.
Okay, now hang
So
on. I have to ask you. I have to ask you something, because it is the elephant in the room, and that is this: that the suggestion is that Muslims have more children because of their religion, not because of poverty. Right? That is the elephant in the room. That is often what is insinuated. I think that research needs to call this out empirically. We have an excellent book by S.Y. Qureshi that buries many of these myths around the population debate. What is the biggest myth, Sanghamitra, that you have heard when it comes to the Hindu-Muslim population question?
I think you nailed it. And I think what people actually need to look at is fertility rates by education levels, by wealth quintiles. And when you look at that data, when you break the data down, an educated Muslim is having just as many children as a Hindu. He wants to have 2 children. Every educated person or someone who's who has the right means wants to have lesser number of children. So, by investing in education, in health, in access to contraceptives, fertility decline is a natural phenomenon, and that's what we should let it be.
Yeah.
Our family planning programs always been voluntary in nature. Whatever strides we are witnessing today,
So-
they are all,
Yeah.
outcomes of voluntary actions.
Let me take this to Mohandas Pai. Mohan, you said you've been studying the Indian data for years. Do you actually believe that coercive legislation, whether based on penalties or economic incentives, is effective? And two, to this point of the Hindu-Muslim population debate, I think Sanghamitra makes a great point. Class in education may tell you more than religion.
Barka, let me make it clear. Coercion will not work in India. We've seen it in the Nasbandi era. We've seen what happened. There should be no coercion in legislation. Okay? And two, we do not require a population control law at this point of time in any part of the country. I don't agree with that. And point number three, when you compare with China, we got to be careful. China by law mandated a one-child policy. India by law, any law is not mandating a one-child policy. All they're saying is a population control bill where you'll not be eligible for government benefits if you have more than 2 children. That's all. Political benefits are some social benefits, economic benefits. We are not forcing people to have one child. So let's not compare with China. That will be very, very wrong. What I would like the government to do, Barka, is that double, triple the scholarships given to Muslim girls in the Muslim community. Train them for high quality jobs, because there's a direct correlation between number of children and for educated women. There's a direct correlation. And the
Yes.
data is very, like I read out to you, the gross enrollment rate for Muslims is only 5.2. It's the poorest for all communities in this country, the lowest, though it's growing at 7.7% a year for the last 7 years. And I think we should give more scholarship. Two, more importantly, Muslims are concentrated in certain areas and they're very conservative because of different reasons. We must start more girls' colleges in those areas. As part of education group in Karnataka, we had women there, and I made the suggestion, let's have girls' college in North Karnataka, where gross enrollment is low, and there are more of conservative people. They jumped on me. How can you do this? We want co-ed. It doesn't work, because of one generation, We need to have girls' education, so girls get educated, they become educated mothers, and their children can go to co-ed. But if you do not have girls' separate education right now, till we come up to a certain level, they will not send the girls to college. And the girls goes to college, does a bachelor's degree. You know, Barka, many girls want to do masters and PhD because they don't want to get married. And that's the way to force their families. So invest in the girl Muslim child. Give them double, triple the scholarship. Train them for more jobs. Ensure more jobs reach Muslim women. And you will find a dramatic change. That is what India should do.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mohandas Pai. I think you've laid out some very, very good and specific suggestions, and I almost agree with every single point that you've made. Sharad, let me get you to comment on why you think Yogi Ji is having a rethink, especially when you look at the fact that it isn't just UP. Let's be fair to Yogi Adityanath also. This is several states, also Parliament. There have been 10 private member bills on population control introduced in Parliament since 2014. 8 of them, of course, are BJP or BJP-leaning members. Why do you think Yogi Adityanath might be having a rethink? Do you think experts have managed to convince him otherwise?
No, I'll tell you. First of all these states have only followed. Yogi Adityanath was the first one to move the idea, and thereafter there was a rat race, and particularly with the other BJP chief ministers who wanted to be one up on Yogi, but Yogi certainly went ahead of them. The second thing is, there has been opposition to this move from within, both in the BJP and RSS ranks in Uttar Pradesh. And they have objected to it because, most of them have more than 3 children. That is the inside story. So they have themselves objected to it, and that is the reason Yogi Adityanath is giving his second thoughts to this. And that's the reason our friend Mr. Ashwini Shahi is also talking in softer terms now, that he's talking in Hindu, Ambo, poor and the rich and all that,
तो अश्विनी जी, इसमें आखिरी बयान आपसे लेते हैं कि क्या ये आप मानेंगे कि संघ में, बीजेपी में, आरएसएस में खुद ही एक थोड़ा सा डिस्कम्फर्ट है इस कानून को लेकर, और शायद इसी वजह से आज आप थोड़ी नरमी दिखा रहे हैं शरद जी के लिए?
देखिए, शरद जी के लिए कोई मतलब हमने जो चीज कहना था, शरद जी नरमी की कोई बात ही नहीं है। शरद जी ने अपने वो सारे मुद्दे रखे, शरद जी हमेशा रखते रहते हैं। लेकिन मैं अभी शरद जी कहना चाहूंगा, ये चूहा की कोई दौड़ नहीं है। उड़ीसा में 92 में ये लागू हुआ था, राजस्थान में 94 में लागू हुआ, आंध्रा में जो है 94 में लागू हुआ। तो योगी जी को क्यों कह रहे हैं कि योगी जी की देखने से जो है भारतीय जनता पार्टी के वो लोग रख रहे हैं? वो चीजें हम लोग भी लागू करना चाहते हैं, क्योंकि ये देश की समस्या है। आज हम इस देश की समस्या पर कंट्रोल पा लें तो ज्यादा बेहतर है। इसलिए हमने 2 काम किया एक साथ। ये कानून हम लेकर जरूर आएंगे, लेकिन उसके पहले हम लड़कों के जो गरीबी है, उस गरीबी से उनको ऊपर लाएंगे, उनको शिक्षित करेंगे, उनको शिक्षा करने का, जैसे मदरसों में जितना काम हमने किया है, योगी सरकार ने किया उत्तर प्रदेश की मदरसों में, उतना किसी सरकार ने नहीं किया है। हमने उनके शिक्षा पर काम किया है, हमने उनके कई मदरसों को बेहतर बजट दिया है, संस्कृत विद्यालयों को भी दिया है और उनको भी दिया है। जो टीचर जो है इधर से उधर जाए, कम से कम सिर्फ जो है हमने कहा कि सिर्फ कुरान की पढ़ाई ना हो, वहां साइंस की भी पढ़ाई हो, वहां से बच्चे अच्छे होकर निकले। तो हम जब इस पर काम करेंगे, वहां उनकी गरीबी को दूर करेंगे, वहां उनकी गुर्बत को मिटाएंगे, फिर हमारे पास जो बच्चों की स्ट्रेंथ तैयार होगी, वो बच्चे शहरों में आकर, वो बच्चे आगे बढ़कर हम अपने आप पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल के बारे में सोचेंगे। वो कानून के बारे में नहीं सोचेंगे, वो अपने लिए सोचेंगे। तो हम उस पर भी काम कर रहे हैं जी।
ये बहुत अच्छी बात है। मैं ये कहना चाह रही थी, दिस इज अ रेयर प्रोग्राम वेयर एक्चुअली आई थिंक वी आर ऑल ब्रॉडली इन एग्रीमेंट इन एवरीथिंग दैट हैज बीन सेड। दिस इज नॉट एनी लॉन्गर एज पोलराइजिंग अ कॉन्वर्सेशन एज इट यूज्ड टू बी, व्हिच इज अ गुड थिंग। आई थिंक वी ऑल अग्री दैट एजुकेशन एंड इकोनॉमिक्स, you want to talk about population control and population stabilization, please do talk about education, economics, and in particular, I think, as both Mohan and Sanghamitra have said, and Sharath and Ashwini agree, the education of girls. To keep girls in school, to keep girls in college, to empower them to fight the orthodox and the clergy in their own communities. And I think when we talk about the Muslim population numbers, we must focus in this space, what's happening to the education of girls, what's happening to their economic empowerment. I will say thank you here. It's been a pleasure having this conversation. I was expecting a raging row. It hasn't happened. Ashwini Shahi, Mohandas Pai, Sharad Pradhan, and Sanghamitra Singh, thank you so much. We'll keep an eye on this story. The data does indeed tell very interesting stories, and they need to be broken down further. We'll be back soon with more on this. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for
Thank you,
watching our
Barkha.
work.
There's a good
if you
one,
haven't
and I
subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support